Welcome back to Black Swan Outdoors. And today we are going to talk about grounding and resistors. This is something that we go in depth in Guerrilla Communications book, which is coming out shortly. But I thought maybe I'd do a quick video of this. And I originally intended to do this video in the field, but I felt that maybe in the workshop here it would be easier to see what I'm talking about in terms of the application and actually see the devices versus in the field where taking pictures and video can be a lot harder. It also meant that I had to bring some of these props out with me, and quite frankly I just didn't feel like I needed to do that. So this is more of a conceptual video. If I have time down the road, I will do an application video where we can actually apply some of these skills and techniques. But again, I think sometimes just doing a tabletop example might be a little bit better for others to be able to see, which is much more important. Okay, so that being said, let's jump into this. There's two components to the long wire military style antennas that can be used for guerrilla communications. These can be hasty antennas that you build with things that you find out in the field. These could be also antennas that you pre-make with you and bring out into the field. Okay, so I'm not going to go too in-depth in antenna theory because we'll do some of this in other videos, and also I go more in-depth in the book on this, and it's also widely available online as well. So I'm going to kind of hone in on some things that aren't often talked about either on other websites or aren't very clear in the military field manuals that you can do. So one of the most important parts of a long wire antenna in particular, and many HF antennas, is effective grounding. And now grounding can mean a lot of different things. It's a word that means different things. In this case, what we're doing is we're using the ground to continue our connectivity. In order to do that, you simply just need to take a stake and stick that into the ground. A metal stake like this camping stake, is adequate. Better grounding means better contact, but it also means better EC, and EC stands for electric connectivity. And electric connectivity is an extremely important part of grounding, and it's often not talked about. Just sticking a stake into the ground doesn't simply mean that you're going to make the right connection that you need. So there's ions, positive and negative ions, that are charged in the soil, and certain soils are going to have certain of these negatively charged ions. And this is a really important concept for gardening and for growing. And you can test a soil with an EC meter like this one. Actually, this one's for water in particular, but there's soil-based EC meters that'll give you a rough idea on what the ground's electric connectivity, or EC, is going to be. Now, you can also anecdotally do this by looking at an EC map. There's actually a map which I'll make available on the website, or I'm sorry, that is available in the book, and also is will be available in the Resistance library in our communications section. But you can certainly Google for an EC map of the United States to get an idea. The other thing that you can do is just look at the soil itself. When you see black or dark, lush, moist soil, the vegetation around that soil is going to be green and lush. That is a pretty good indicator that that soil has a high EC, or lots of organic matter on top, so on and so forth. A soil that's going to be more, the vegetation is going to be more desolate above, going to be more tan in color, dry, is not going to have a lot of EC. And so that might mean a larger grounding mechanism. That might mean wetting the soil in the area to get a better connection. It could mean many different things. And so you want to making sure that if you need a good ground, that you're using good ground. if that makes sense. And so you want the best connection possible. The drawback of these stakes, I like these stakes because they work really well for grounding, particularly in like a field or grassy areas. In an urban context, grounding can be harder to do. You can look for cold water pipes indoors. Grounds that are can be made with wells and different items that are or fence grounding for like electric fences, things like that that might be available in and around an urban or rural area that you can find some adequate grounding in already. So there may be some established means in which you can ground your connection with things that are also available in an urban or rural environment. But in a more wilderness setting or a less developed setting, you're going to need to carry with you some type of grounding stake. Sometimes a counterpoise can act as a ground, and we'll talk about that and the differences in a future video. And can work quite well. However, for many of the long wire radio antennas in those field manuals, military field manuals, they don't really talk a lot about grounding and some alternative methods of grounding or what you're actually doing when you're grounding. In a pinch, you can also ground by using a large knife. You can stick this into the bark of a tree and wrap your wire around the blade. Of course, you're going to want to take the sheathing off if you have any sheathing. Sticking this right into a tree could provide you enough grounding to make a connection as well. So, or sticking this directly into the ground as well. So you can certainly use your knife to do that. The other thing that is not often talked about very clearly, especially with the long wire antennas, is the resistor. The resistor is one of the components that we include, that I suggest to have with you in your field antenna kit, which we did in a future video or a previous video, and we'll talk more about in future videos. And a 300 to 600 ohm resistor. This one's a 13 watt resistor is all that you really need to have, and it basically there's a mathematical equation which you can figure out the exact resistor for the radio that you're using. I'm not going to get into that kind of detail. I don't know if it's entirely necessary. In fact, I don't know if it's necessary to have a resistor that's too large versus one that's too small or doesn't have enough ohms. If you know the answer to that question, please put that in the comments below, because I'd be curious to know in terms of performance. So this resistor, they're lightweight, they're relatively inexpensive. They're a little harder to come by with Radio Shacks no longer open in many places. But you used to be able to pick these up in many electronic stores. Now you'll have to go online to get these. I would suggest getting multiple resistors because you can use them for multiple antennas. They're not disposable necessarily, but they're prone to breaking, easily get lost, and so on and so forth. So definitely have multiple resistors. The one thing that they don't talk about in the field manuals about the resistors is how to attach the resistor to the line. And there's many different ways you can actually do this. You can certainly just remove the sheathing and twist the resistor onto the wire. You're not going to get a very robust, very sturdy connection. It might be a connection that will work. You could certainly tape that resistor on to get that connection as well. You could do also, what I did here was pre-wired one resistor on one side. So that's ready to go. I can attach that. And what I did here with this antenna, and I'll show you in another video the application for it, is I put an I terminal here, or ring terminal, sorry, on the end of this, so that I can attach this directly to a stake. Now, I like these garden stakes just because they're lightweight. They're not going to give me a super great ground, but they're very lightweight and handy, and they can go into rocky soil fairly well. and they hold. So I can make a ground by just running this stake through here. If I had a larger ring terminal, perhaps I might be able to just make that ground by sticking the stake through here as well. Or I could just, like I said, wrap this without the sheathing around it. So the trick here is to keep that resistor low and next to the ground. In the diagrams, the resistor is up midway up the antenna. What you're trying to do is you're trying to pull the energy forward. And that's what the resistor does. It actually pulls that energy forward onto that line, making that energy, directing that energy forward, making it more directional. And if you have the resistor up high, that takeoff point is going to be much higher. It's not going to be as directed as it is if it's going to be close to the stake. So you want to make sure that this resistor is as close to the ground as possible, which is why I have a short line here. This line that it has an I terminal, I could also connect two resistors. If I just put a ring terminal on both ends of the line of the wire antenna, and simply just wrap the resistor around this terminal and connect it that way. So I can certainly quickly do that. That's going to require me to have pliers in the field. So a Leatherman would be fine to do that. Now, if you don't have a resistor, that's okay. You can actually get by without a resistor by making a resistor in the field. One way that you can do that is through a water bottle or your canteen. You basically just want to run your line down into the water bottle. This is your wire antenna going into the water bottle. Put a little salt in the water, and then have another line then running directly to your stake in the ground. So you can see why this could be hard to see in grass or in leaves when this is sitting in the ground. But basically, you're just going to make your connection. This is your resistor. The salt water is going to provide enough resistance to pull that energy forward. Now, if you don't have a water bottle, the FM manuals talk about using a small earplug or ear-pro container. You could fill this with water. In the military application, you'll have salt with your MREs. If you have rehydration salt, that should work fine too. But if you want to just carry a few pinches of salt with you, little salt packets, put that in your kit as a backup, that would be fine as well. So you're basically just going to poke a hole through each side, run your line through this container full of salt water, and you've got yourself now a kind of a DIY resistor. The other thing you can use is a spent battery. In this case, I just carried a nail, and I didn't include that in my original field kit, but if you wanted to, you could certainly carry a nail with you. You just take the nail, take the pommel end of your knife, and give it a few taps. Battery acid will come out, so you need to be careful with that. Strip your line, and then just stick that right in to the battery. And now you have a resistor that's going to work at least for a little while. So I'm not sure how long this method will work. You can use other types of batteries as well, but the AAA battery is lightweight, and oftentimes, a lot of people have flashlights and things like that out in the field as well. So just the battery is going to work fine as a resistor. So really, it's all about making that connection to the ground and making a connection to those components that aren't really often talked about or described in the field manuals. So these little ring terminals are handy for for these resistors to twist on and make it an easy connection. You can use other types of connections as well. The ring terminals just work really well in this capacity. Also because they serve at the top of your split post connector, which we talked about in the previous video, to connect an antenna to. That if you want a good connection, that you can use these ring terminals for that as well. If you're using larger, stouter wire, what I've just done is put it right through this hole right in here and then clamp that closed. But for the stranded wire, I think it works best with these little ring terminals to use. Makeshift wire in the field can be found with barbed wire, any fencing wire. You can take apart bed springs. There's all sorts of wire that can be used. And again, we talk about a lot of this stuff in the field manual for Gorilla Radio. Hopefully this was a helpful video to you. If you have any comments or questions, if I got anything wrong, or if you've got some other suggestions or ways in which you can ground in the field or create a resistor, please put that in the comments below. And as I said, I'll try to make some videos of some field applications for this type of antenna, these types of antennas. Thanks again. Remember to like and subscribe, and tune in for more antenna videos, which we'll have out shortly.